if there is an art in war, then Hitler failed as an artist. You can connect Archduke Franz Ferdinand to hentai. Who would win in a fight? 300 war elephants or the Alps? If you could have buried it, cremated it, thrown it away, or done anything else, but you literally decided to eat your eyeball. My hometown had the first McDonald's drive-thru. Now that's history. Hello, historians, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Daddy's History. I'm very excited for this series that we have coming up in the next few weeks. This is a time period that I have just been a huge fan of since I was a child. I was first introduced to this through video games. Many of you may have known Dynasty Warriors. And as soon as I got this game, I was just in love with it. I played every day. And so when I found out that it was based in reality and actually based off of a book called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I bought the book and I read through them. Both volumes, very thick books. They were the first big books that I had ever read in my life. And then I found out that much of the book was romanticized. Basically a fan fiction of sorts about this time period. So then I started looking into more. I began looking into more historically accurate stories and evidence to what actually occurred. But if you guys didn't already tell, the next series that we have will be based on the Three Kingdoms era in ancient China. This is a fantastic period of China. If you haven't ever read up on Chinese history, as well as any kind of Asian country, can sometimes be different studying it for many different reasons. For me, it was always difficult because obviously the names are not names I'm used to understanding. And so when I would read about certain characters or certain time periods, it'd be difficult for me to keep up, especially when, in the case of the Three Kingdoms, there's hundreds of characters and people involved in various stories. And oftentimes I would just get people confused, or people would walk in their room and have a conversation. I'd be like, who the hell is this guy? And find out he was mentioned 4 chapters ago. You know, but he also has a similar name to 3 other characters that you'd seen in between those chapters. So it can be a bit difficult, but this is where I think the Three Kingdoms is a bit easier to study, because there are so many other media out there to use as like a reference. So when I'm reading my book that I will mention throughout this show, and it has, for instance, Guanyu, which is spelled, it actually spells it phonetically, which makes it a lot easier to say. It's spelled Kuanyu. And when I first read it, I said, well, who is Guanyu? I know who Guanyu is. Well, that's because he's a major character in the Dynasty Warriors. But, you know, they made it simple and easy. And same thing. For years, I used to say Cao, because his name is spelled Cao. And actually the first, I'd say, 4 or 5 Dynasty Warriors, they say his name is Cao. And then during one of the games, they start calling him Cao. And I'm like, why do they change his name? I thought it was Cao. It's got a C. Cao. It's Cao. And then I had all these jokes about him milking the talent of China when he hires Zhang Liao and Hua Zhong and all this kind of stuff. And every time I'd use him, I'd go, moo, Coco's here. Like, I had stuff that connected me to him. And then I found out that it's actually pronounced TS, which it is in the book as well. So, you know, you gotta figure out how you can learn for yourself. Unfortunately, and we don't have great teaching techniques for history. So sometimes you just got to come up with your own. But I'm very excited to have on the show with me Steve Tracy. He was our guest on the first episode when we talked about Lauren Allen Torney, the Soldier of 3 Armies. He's back today He's the only person that I've met that has any kind of recollection of this time period, strictly because he played Dynasty Warriors. But when I told him what the series was going to be about, he was very excited. So I'm super glad to have him back on. He's, of course, a co-host with the very funny Ray Ubla of the 2 Joke Minimum podcast. And he also helps produce this show. So, we're always glad to have him on. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for listening in to this episode. This is going to be episode 1 of 4. So make sure you guys wait up for the next few episodes. The first episode is going to be talking about basically a setup to the end of the Han Dynasty and the entrance into the 3 kingdoms, but we won't really get into the true 3 kingdoms until episodes 2 and 3. And then the 4th episode is going to be basically the conclusion. So thank you guys so much for listening, and remember, this is not your daddy's history. Yes, today people talk about anti-Asian hate, but let's talk about Asian on Asian crime with the 3 kingdoms. Asian on Asian hate. Oh man.
That's what it was. They killed each other a lot.
They did. They killed each other a lot. So I am super excited to talk about this subject. This is
really interesting.
This is probably my first major historical period that I found out about as a kid that made me realize I love studying this. I love studying history. And I'm like most, I'm sure, white kids in America. My first exposure to it was I was at a friend's house and he's like, "Do you want to play PlayStation?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I got this game called Dynasty Orders," and I was like, "Oh, let's do it." And we're playing it, and I'm just loving it.
Right.
And then he tells me, he's like, "This stuff is all real," and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "All these people are real," and I'm like,
"Well,
that's crazy.
The battles are real. One dude slaughtering hundreds of other dudes, with a single swing of his axe.
Yeah. Charging into a platoon of people on a horse that makes them fly 10 feet when the horse runs into them. Not completely accurate.
Some cases where, I guess, examples of that did happen because these highly trained soldiers fighting peasant militias.
Yeah.
The peasants just didn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
So, but it's exaggerated. Nobody can keep that up for an entire battle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's
cool shit. You get to just be like a god among men in those games. You're just slaughtering.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that became if I had a stressful day, I would just come home and just be like, I'm gonna kill 1,000 people today.
He's good.
And I just pick the largest battle, Chibi. And before the in that particular battle, if you do something, it wipes out half the enemy. So I would just stop that thing from happening and then just go kill everybody. They'd be like, "Oh no, our plan didn't work, and now the enemy's forces are coming at us." And I'm like, "Don't worry, guys. I'm playing on easy right now. I'm gonna kill everybody."
No, it's fine. I got this one.
I got this, guys. Oh man, but yeah. So I played Dynasty Warriors. I owned a couple copies, and then I found the book that is most. It's the biggest literature that is associated with this time period, the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, written in the 14th century.
Sure.
By Lo Guangzhong, I think is his name. Lu Guangzhong. And of course, obviously, and I said this in the intro, we're gonna butcher the fuck out of these names.
Oh, for sure.
Super sorry. Thankfully, the book that I have actually presents the names phonetically, so it's actually really helpful because, I remember the first time I played Dynasty Warriors, Cao Cao's name it's Cao, and the first game I played it called him Cao Cao, so I called him Cao Cao for years.
I thought his name was Coco.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to look at it. It's it's gotta be Coco or something. And then when I was reading the book, they keep talking about this guy, but his name is Tsao, and I'm like, Cao Cao, and I'm like, is that his fucking name, Cao Cao? And then I remember the games eventually caught up to the actual phonetic sayings of the names. So I was playing a Dynasty Warriors game, and they're like, "Look, it's Cao Cao," and I'm like, "Oh, fuck, that is how you say his name." I was like, "I've just been fucking it up for years."
I mean, it's hard to know exactly how it's pronounced because it's like all written, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like written history.
Yeah.
And also, it might not even be history.
That is true.
There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that think this might have just been like a myth, like this is
Yeah.
a mythological time period.
Yeah. Well, and it's very much like what you say, like King Arthur. Like King Arthur has some historical background that suggests that there was a king either similar to or something like that to King Arthur. But did he have Knights of the Round Table? Did he fight dragons and get a sword from the stone? No, of course not. No, it didn't happen.
Yeah, she gave him a sword, and then he made friends with a bunch of fellas.
Bunch of fellas.
Yeah, and then
just the boys
was a witch. Her name was Morgan, and they had to find the Holy Grail. It was a quest for God.
You know a lot more about King Arthur than I know.
Oh, well, invite me back when you cover that episode.
I will. Will do. But yeah, so they had so it is a lot of it's very mythical. However, the writings, the Romance of Three Kingdoms, he did basically he took the writing. Like there's another writing called the Histories of the Three Kingdoms, and that is the actual historical document that notes what actually happened.
That's why it's called.
Yes. So I've always when I found out about this, I was like, dude, this is the first fan fiction of humanity. This guy literally read a textbook of this period in China, and then he's like, that'd be really cool, but what if it was like this? And then he wrote his own fan fiction.
He was like, oh, this is really interesting, but it's boring. Let me
What if I made these two characters kiss?
What if everybody was betraying each other? Ooh.
Whoa. But that being said, a lot of historians have kind of said that the Romance of Three Kingdoms is like, if you looked at it, it's like 70 to 80% accurate, and then there's just a lot of dramatization. So while it is obviously a lot of it's fictional, a lot of it's also still historical, and it's really surprising when you read the book and then you find out the actual history of it, how much of it is accurate. Where you're like, oh, I thought that part was made up, and then you find out that they're like, at least that's what was written down. So that is really
often stranger than fiction. That's what they say.
Yes. So I wanted to cover real quick just a brief history of China leading up to the Han Dynasty, because obviously the Three Kingdoms era comes from the decline and the end of the Han Dynasty. The first true dynasty was the Qin Dynasty, and that one was basically the one where the first emperor of China unified a bunch of nations, and he's the one that created the Great Wall of China. He
that came later.
No, well, this is the first guy, and he was the one that did that one. Now, the wall had existed, but it wasn't the great size that it is now. Like, there was a wall that was built, and he's like, we have a wall over here, we have a wall over there, let's connect them.
It was more of like a great fence of China.
Exactly, and he made it bigger, he made it longer. He also is the same one that built the terracotta soldiers when he died. So the terracotta soldiers that they dug up are from that same time period. However, his kingdom or his dynasty fell quickly because he was very tyrannical, and as soon as he died, the government became weak, and the people that he beat and subjected were like, "Fuck this," and they rose up against him. And then that is when the Han Dynasty comes into play. So the guy that creates the Han Dynasty, Liu Ban, I think is his name, Liu Bang. He is actually one of the warlords that fights in the aftermath of the Qin Dynasty and what's called the Warring States period, another possible episode. And then he creates the Han Dynasty. So, and what this kind of follows is this is called like the cycle of like Chinese dynasties, or what is in the book is often called as the mandate of heaven, right? Which is like the divine right that the emperor has to rule as the emperor of China, right? And then if the emperor or the government becomes corrupt, then they lose the mandate from heaven. People will rise up, overthrow the government, and then a new one takes its place. And then they'll have the mandate of heaven until eventually they do it. And every dynasty that's ever existed in China has done this exact same thing. Like it's the definition of history repeating itself because it happens every single time.
Right. Yeah. It's like they build a society, it collapses, and then we get to look at this like post-apocalyptic almost country where there's just all these warring factions vying for power. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
So
it probably sucked to be alive during that.
Yeah.
Where you're gonna end up in somebody's army. You're probably going to be like some shitty peasant soldier who, just had a stick or a pitchfork. And, obviously, no offense to peasants.
If there's any peasants listening.
If any of you peasants are listening, no offense. But, they were used kind of, just to fill in, to wear the enemy out.
Yeah.
So they gotta, they're gonna be hacking and slashing. Let's give them something to hack and slash.
Right.
Good troops out there.
And in an ancient Chinese military, because I was recently watching a video where this guy was discussing this issue where, let's say you take an army from the Roman Empire, right? Oh, and this is a really interesting thing. Another thing that happened in the Han Dynasty was the establishment of the Silk Road, which is the trade route that happened from China to basically like Eastern Europe. There are some archaeological evidence.
The Middle East.
Yeah, it goes like just about to the Middle East. I think the farthest it went to was Constantinople, which is in Turkey, right? There is some archaeological evidence that suggests that some Chinese, like Han Chinese traders, met Roman traders and they traded with each other. Because I want to say in some ancient city in like Italy, they have found Chinese coin, and likewise in like the farthest like parts of what was ancient China, they have found Roman coin. And that to me is amazing. That I'm like, dude, I used to think that these people never knew about each other until centuries and centuries later, and you find out that like an ancient Roman and an ancient Chinese might have met one day, and you're like, fuck, that's awesome.
I like
that's
that
amazing.
Ancient Chinese. That's
an ancient Chinese. It's they're older than regular Chinese.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that that those people didn't keep a record of that. Like either one of them should have come back and written down, hey, there's like another massive civilization thousands of miles away from us, and we should maybe team up or
like see what's up, trade with them. Yeah,
right.
Well, and that's what makes it more heartbreaking whenever you find out things like people burning books or like ancient libraries burning to the ground. Is you're like, dude, that library that burned down could have had that information. It could have had that contact and that stuff, but they don't have it anymore because it fucking went away.
I mean, dude, and like, you ever think about like if we didn't have war, like if there was just no war, you ever think about this? Like if this period didn't have so many people killing each other and instead they just all read books and tried to figure stuff out and like work together and cooperate, we'd probably have colonized the galaxy by now.
I think so too. Yeah, without war, we'd be fucking on Mars right now.
We'd all be Elon Musk.
Yeah, be fucking throwing Dogecoin in everyone's face.
Yeah, suck my Dogecoin.
But so where the Three Kingdoms kind of begins is it begins at the end of the Han Dynasty, where the empire has started to collapse, weaken. It's not nearly as strong. Something I did want to note too is that I always read that during the Three Kingdoms period, which is I think roughly 70 years, it is very bloody, right? A lot of people die during this time. And I always heard that it was a lot of people. So in a census that was taken during the Han Dynasty in part of the later years, there was, let's see, 10,677,960 households. Okay. And that was with 56,486,856 people. Okay, so 56 million people, and a census taken during, I think it was like 150 AD Han Dynasty, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 280 AD, which takes place after the end of the Three Kingdoms in the next empire, they took a census, and there was 2,459,000 households with 16,160,000 people.
I mean,
So
that sounds like 40,000 people got murdered.
40,000 decline in population. 40 million.
Or, hear me out. Maybe they killed the guy that knew how to count.
And that is one of those things that people argue that like you can't really trust. That you can say like, listen, they obviously like maybe they just didn't have an accurate way to count at the time that they took it, because 280 AD is at the pretty much the end of the Three Kingdoms conflict. So maybe they just didn't have an accurate way to do it. But like, what you're saying that they miscounted 40 million people?
I mean, that's
like that's a large margin to say, oops, didn't count that.
I mean, yeah, I could see that's like a big mistake to make, is like missing all that, but also for 40 million people to have died, like that's like 90% of that country.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah. I read somewhere that if the amount of people that died in the book died in real life, that China's population still hasn't come back from it. And that's just because the writer of the book, he fluffed the numbers a bit to make them even bigger. So
of course.
Yeah.
That's what you gotta do when you're a writer, baby. You gotta exaggerate a little bit.
Yeah. You gotta make it look gotta make it look nice, sound nice. It's gotta roll off the tongue. So the Han Empire was a golden age in Chinese history. It had huge advances in philosophy, mathematics, science, just a bunch of great shit. During the top period of the Han Dynasty, there was a very strong central government. Like, if anything happened, it was because the emperor created it. Like, he made it happen. You know, if the army went out and conquered a new area, that's because the emperor created the army, set forth, and then he let it fucking, take over what he wanted. During the end of the Han Dynasty, which is where the story now begins, the emperor has basically become a lazy piece of shit.
Right. He's an old man now, right?
Yeah, he's older. He's got 2 sons, but he basically just wants to just philander, hang out, just fucking just chill in the place. And there becomes drought and famine all throughout the dynasty, and the empire the government basically just ignores it. And that's part to do with this ruling faction of eunuchs called the 10 Eunuchs.
Yeah, the eunuchs are cool.
I had to look up eunuchs because it was me and you. We both watch Game of Thrones, so we've heard the term used because you have characters in there that are eunuchs. But I've always wondered, and I'm like, but what's the point of a eunuch? Like, obviously, a eunuch can be someone who's just had their balls and dick cut off, right? Like Euron Greyjoy, he becomes a eunuch, but that's because he got his dick cut off.
Yeah.
Right? So that just happens to him. Yeah, but like,
eunuch, he was castrated.
Right, he was castrated, but like you could technically just refer to him as a eunuch and say that's what he is now that he's castrated. Okay. But like a eunuch in like ancient societies, they cut them off basically because they were like you could make this guy, you could cut his dick off and make him like an officer of the court, and it would be fine because he can't have kids. He wouldn't try to create like a dynasty for himself.
Right, exactly.
Because he can't have a kid. And I'm like,
his ability to challenge you.
Yeah. And it's like, whoa, holy shit. Like, what the fuck?
Right. You keep him useful, make him work for you.
Yeah.
But then you take away his dick, so
yeah,
he can't have his family, and he can't have any heirs, and he has like no, because like part of being an emperor is that you have a dynasty, and to have a dynasty, you have to have heirs, and if you don't have a dong,
can't make no heirs.
It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, because what are they gonna fucking adopt you? Oh, fucking gross.
Who adopts kids?
Yeah. Ooh. Option. Yeesh.
Yeesh. Yeah. So towards the end of the Han Dynasty, you have this group of factions called the 10 Eunuchs, which, and this is funny, right? Because we say, like, the point is that they shouldn't be able to take power, because what are they going to do? They can't pass it on to their kids. But the 10 Eunuchs are like these 10 eunuch leaders that have the emperor's ear and basically corrupt the government and sell positions of power and do shit so they can get their own money. So they're like, yo, I may not be able to fuck, but I'm gonna fucking water ski. Okay, like I'm gonna fucking live life to the fullest with what I can do.
Right. It's pretty cool. They do kind of get their revenge, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's really what they were going for, was revenge. I'd rather just, have a dong.
Right. I would much rather have a dong.
I mean,
I think that would be it's much better.
when life gives you lemons,
Oh, yeah. Make penis nade.
Make something else because you can't make kids.
I would be interested in the idea of becoming a eunuch later in life, like when I get older.
What? Why?
Yeah, because once you can't use it, just get rid of it.
What are you gonna pee with? Do you think about that?
No, you leave a little nub or something. You leave something to pee with. Women pee without penises. I would just sit down and pee.
Yeah, but they have a different structure. It works. They're not going to just give you a vagina. That's not how it works.
Right, but like you would just you leave a little bit. Like you just get like half off. You just like take the tip off, basically. You just like you
I don't
just
know how I feel about this concept of like elder mutilation.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying we should mutilate old people.
That's exactly what you're saying.
No,
exactly
I'm saying as an old person, I would be like, they'd be like, "Do you want to take off your penis?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure. Go ahead, knock it off."
I'm not following this logic at all.
You're not following? All right, that's fine. That's fine. I'm saying it's less for me to drag around. Is all I'm saying.
Why don't you just lose a couple pounds?
Because it's easier for me to cut off my penis than it is for me to lose a couple pounds.
I mean, you're already open to surgery.
Yeah.
Why not just get some of that sucked out?
Hey, I could do that. My wife did one of those things where she asked like a woman question. She was like, "What would you say if I said I want to get liposuction?" And I said, "Not before me." I was like, "I got to get it first, honey."
Right. Yeah. Priorities.
Yeah. I was like, between us, which one can't go up the flight of stairs? Exactly. I'll get it first.
Yeah, but you're not just an individual now. You're a married man, so you're a part of a couple, and as a couple, unity. You can't exceed a certain BMI. So
got you. I didn't know there was a couple BMI.
It doesn't matter, but mostly you need it.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. This is why I don't have a webcam. I don't want you looking at me when you say these things.
I need to see you.
Oh.
I like seeing your little chin hairs.
Oh, thank you. I do have some nice chin hairs.
You look like a little chubby billy goat.
Okay, moving on.
Do you want to kink me in for me?
So we're going to talk about the Yellow Turban Rebellion at this point.
Are they the Zhang Brothers? The Zhang Brothers?
The Zhang Brothers, yeah. Yeah, the Zhang Brothers.
They basically just started a cult that created this chain reaction.
Yep. That was essentially it. And I think some of the best parts too is when you play Dynasty Warriors. Some of the best characters are the fucking Yellow Turbans in the games. They're so funny. They have some of the best dialogue. There's this guy who literally is just like, "Can you deal with my magic?" And it's like,
I don't remember any dialogue from Dynasty Warriors.
Oh, they're great. Well, the older ones are great. As the later on they go, they try to make it more serious and the dialogue's a lot better. But if you go back and play the second or third one, they're horrible. But they're horrible in a great way. It's like watching a B movie, like a B horror movie or something.
Right, for sure.
So the Empire is in shambles. The people are starving. There's drought everywhere. everything's fucking falling apart, and the emperor is just getting his dick sucked by his like 20 wives, and the eunuchs are not getting that done to them, but they're just fucking hanging out and just swimming in tubs of wine and gallivanting and shit. And so these three guys start up, as you said, a cult basically, or a religious sect of Taoism. And the main brother is Zhang Jiao, and then there's Zhang Zhu, and I think Zhang Bao, something like that.
Yeah, it's like yeah.
I think that was it. I think it was the third one.
Go with that one.
No one ever remembers the third child, so we're not going to remember.
I don't remember any of their actual names or which one did which.
Yeah,
but they're the Zhang brothers.
Right, the Zhang brothers.
And one of them is basically a wizard.
Yeah. So in the Romance of Three Kingdoms novel, what happens is that the older brother Zhang Jiao is walking up a mountain, and he runs into this old man, and the old man's like, "Hey man, China's fucked, isn't it?" And then he's like, "Yeah, China is really fucked." He goes, "Hey, you're a smart cookie. Here's this book," and he gives him this book called The Way of Peace. And when he opens it, it's got like magical spells that allow him to commune with nature and take control of the elements and stuff. And then the old man like disappears, and then that's how he learns his magical ways, is through this book that he gets. Basically, he claimed to be a magician. And
going back to the emperor for a second, it sounds like he's got his concubines on the left and his eunuchs on the right. It sounds like he thinks he's the only one that should have a penis.
That's true. Yeah, he was like,
he doesn't hang out with anyone else.
He doesn't like. Yeah, it's maybe he's just like one of those chads where he's like, it's like, we need more women here. I'd be like, well, so you do have 100 wives? Like, no, everyone else needs to lose their dick.
I don't think cutting off dicks makes people a woman.
Shut up! I'm cutting off your dick.
I'd really like it if you didn't.
Oh man,
maybe share some of the women with us.
That's so funny. I'm like, it's like somebody who's getting like chummy with the emperor, and he's just like, we should hang out more, and be like, oh yeah, you want to hang out with me more? That's cool. Just go see my imperial barber real quick. And then he cuts his dick off. He's like, now we can hang out.
Now we can kick it.
I only hang out with dickless dudes and chicks.
Yep. I'm the only one who can have a penis in this whole palace.
So the Zhang brothers are super into dicks, and they're like, we cannot have the emperor cutting off everybody's dicks. This has gone on too long. That was the whole message.
Okay.
They're like, we need food and we need dicks.
Right. It hasn't rained in 3 years. Nobody has any food. Somehow it's flooding. But
they also,
the emperor's cutting off everybody's dicks, so we need to
cutting off everyone's dicks.
We need to figure this out.
So they start planning this rebellion, and they start getting a bunch of peasants, and they're getting them armed, but they're keeping all very hush hush. What I like about it, this has always been described as like the Chinese Game of Thrones, right? And it very much is.
It really is.
Because these guys actually get in touch with some eunuchs in the imperial court that believe in what they believe, and they also hate the 10 eunuchs that are corrupting the government. So he has like 2 people that are like acting as spies in like the eunuch faction.
Exactly. And all the main players in season 1 are dead by the end.
That's so true. Spoiler alert. Sorry, everyone dies.
Spoiler alert. Everybody dies, and they die fast. And they die hard. Often betrayed by someone they trusted.
That's true. And that's exactly what happens with the Zhang brothers. Because as they're planning this, one of their own guys betrays them and turns in the 2 eunuchs that were on their side. They get murdered, and the Zhang brothers are immediately like, okay, we just need to start this thing right now. And then a massive amount of peasants began uprising in like northern China, which is where the capital is located at. And it's literally in like the millions. Millions of peasants start rising up and start burning down villages and attacking like military or like government buildings, like administration buildings and shit, and just causing chaos.
That's the strength of the peasantry. They don't have much, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a perfect time to mention what I learned recently in my classes is the characteristics that a rebellion or a revolution needs in order to take place. So one of them is, surprisingly to people, an economically advancing society, right? So it's not actually the poor people that rise up in revolution, because if you're poor, if you're barely making it, you don't have time to think about things like your rights.
Yeah.
You know, your safety. Like you're more worried about what you're going to eat that day, so you don't have time to fucking worry about shit. So it's actually the people that are in some level of stability, right? And as we said before, the Han Dynasty was the golden age of China. So even though it was in its decline, it was at least in a much better place than all the places surrounding it. Even Japan wasn't even like a unified country at this point. It was still just a bunch of its single kingdoms that lived in castles and shit and just battled each other. You also have to have a politically inept ruling class, which is what you have with a weak emperor that doesn't do shit, that just cuts off dicks.
Right. See, that's why you get so weak. He doesn't have any men around him to challenge.
Exactly. He doesn't have any fucking dudes.
He doesn't have
He's a bunch of fucking beta males.
All of his buddies don't have any dongs, so they don't have any. They don't have any of that, that fuck juice.
Yeah. And then you have to have like a radical side of people, right? So obviously any peasant's going to be upset with the situation, but you have specifically the yellow turbans that are claiming like, not only is this just a failure of the government, but that the emperor has lost the mandate of heaven. Like that was their big claim, was that the emperor had lost the mandate from heaven, that he doesn't have a right to rule anymore.
They wouldn't stop saying it. They're always mandate of heaven, mandate of heaven.
That was their chanting phrase.
Yellow turbans, mandate of heaven.
And then the last thing that really sparks it is basically a government crisis, that a crisis that happens that the government can't take control of. And that's what you have with the things like the famines and the disease and stuff that occurs. The government's not doing anything about it, and finally the radicals come in. They're able to convince people, listen, these guys aren't doing shit except cutting off dicks, so we need to just fucking rise up and fight these guys. And that's what happens. And so the empire is in shambles. The peasants are uprising. They're murdering people. More people are going to the yellow turbans. So their numbers just keep growing. And so the emperor, instead of saying, hey, let's have an army, all right, let's build up an army, he instead just tells local warlords and local, administrators basically to, hey, quickly make an army and then go to war with the rebels. Right? And this is when you see the rise of people like Cao Cao, Liyue, Guanyu, Shang Fei, Sun Jian, Yuan Shao, a bunch of like major players, Dong Zhuo, right? Major players that will come into play much later. All these guys start coming up, raising their own armies and going to war with the rebels. But what this does is this weakens the emperor, because he's basically just said, hey guys, go make yourself some armies. Go make your own little kingdoms, basically.
Right. Yeah, he just gave them the power. He didn't want to do anything himself.
Exactly. And so he literally, like, this lays out the groundwork for the next warring period for the next 30-40 years, with all this and what happens. So most of the Zhang brothers died pretty early on. I know Zhang Jiao, the main brother, he died like literally the same year that the rebellion occurred, because he got sick. Two of the other brothers, I think, died in battle. However, the Yellow Turban movement seems to move on for another 20 years. But essentially, once the main brothers die, it's not really much of a concern. During this time is where you see a lot of, like I said, major players that will become major characters later on. One of my favorite stories I wanted to tell was Cao Cao. He's like going through the mountains, like looking for some rebels that he heard was like hiding up there. And as he's walking through, this guy comes out of like the trees, and he's this big giant man, and he's got like a giant axe or something in one hand. He's got one dude slung over his shoulder. He's got one dude that he's got like underneath his arm that he's holding up. And then he's got like around his waist like a rope that's towing like 4 other dudes that are all dead.
Okay.
And they all have yellow turbans.
Backstory.
Yeah. Well, he's just a big, large dude that's also a bit of a simpleton.
Oh.
Like he's kind of an idiot. Yeah. But he comes through and he sees Cao Cao there and he's like, "Oh, are you a rebel?" And Cao Cao, like before he can even say, "No, I'm not," he drops the dudes and charges at him and goes to like kill him. But Cao Cao's bodyguard, Jian Wei, gets in the way and they start fighting. Well, both these guys are like really strong guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like even Jian Wei has a story where he's in a camp and these guys are trying to pull up this like pole to put up this banner, but the wind is so strong that they can't hold it up. So he walks over to him and is like, "I got it." And with one hand, he holds it in place. Just like fucking pulls it and like puts it in the ground with one hand. You know, where he's just like, "Got it."
Yeah, you know, whenever I hear about like ancient feats of strength, I always wonder like what their workout routine was, you know?
Right?
Like, did they have one? Was there like a P90X back then? Like, what did they do? How did
the
they?
workout regimen was just living because they'd be like, "Hey, we need some water. Take the 2-mile hike down to the river and fill these 4 pails of water up, and then carry them back up the mountain where we live."
And then we're gonna have war for the next 10 years. So
exactly.
That'll keep you in shape.
Exactly.
I guess that's
But
true.
so Juju eventually, I think he gets like subdued by Dian Wei, and Cao Cao's like, "Oh, dude, you're so fucking strong. Would you like to come work for me?" And he was like, "Hell yeah!" So then he has another guy who's like his second bodyguard. So he has Dian Wei and Juju as his bodyguard just because he fucking found this guy like carrying around like 4 or 5 like dead bodies. It's so fucking intense.
Where did he get the dead bodies from?
He killed them. So because he was like where Cao Cao was going through was actually near like his like home village, and he had raised like his own army of like maybe 1,000 guys, and was fighting the rebels himself. And in that one instance, he I think there was a story of where he made a little fort, and then like an army of rebels like yellow turbans were coming up to attack the fort, and he told everyone in the fort to take stones that were maybe about apple size or larger and put them into the corners of the fort. And as the rebels would come up, he would go over to the stones and just start fucking chucking them. And every single time he fucking like hit them in the head and cracked their skull. Like he just fucking chucked these stones at people and kept them away. And it's like, oh shit, this guy's fucking. I don't know, I'm trying to think of a famous pitcher. I don't know a famous pitcher in baseball. I was gonna say Sammy Sosa. Like a Babe Ruth. I think he was the biggest pitcher of all. But you have stories like that. Then obviously you have like really, I think like the main character of the 3 kingdoms is Liyue, Shang Wei, and Guanyu. Right, like those are like the 3 big players that I think, at least in like in the novel and in most media, they're portrayed as like the good guys. Like Cao Cao's the evil dude who's conniving and will do whatever he wants to win. Liyue, Guanyu, and Shang Wei, they're the good guys.
Yeah. So he's a bit of a bad boy, which is kind of why his story is so interesting.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's just out there walking through the woods finding other villainous characters.
One of his great quotes in the book, I don't know if historically if it backs up. One of his great quotes is, "I would rather burn the world down than have the world burn me." And it's like, dude, that's such a fucking villain thing to say.
Yeah, that's badass. It's badass.
It's so fucking badass. Like he's so untrustworthy with people. He's like, "I ain't gonna let you fucking fuck me. I'll fuck you before you fuck me."
No, I'm gonna fuck you. Damn, that's cool.
It's great. But Shang Fei, Guanyu, those guys are. I always love playing as them because they were the guys that I think had some of the best moves. And I actually have a few Guanyu statues because he's actually revered as a god of war now in Taoist religion, because of what he did during this time frame.
What did he do?
Oh God, he kills people, just ridiculous. Now, historically, he has been he has been given more kills in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel than what actually occurs in history. There's like one in particular during the Dongzhuo War that is usually given to him, which is I think Yan Liang is like a main general under Dongzhuo, and the story is that nobody's willing to go fight him because the dude's already killed like 3 generals, and they're terrified to go fight him. And then Guanyu stands up and he's like, "I'll go," but no one knows who the fuck this is. For all them know, it's a peasant hanging out with Liyue, who no one knows who the fuck that is. So he goes, "I'll go," and so somebody says, "Well, how about I make some tea before you go?" And he goes, "Keep the tea on the stove. I'll be back." And then he leaves. They hear some clamoring on the battlefield, and then it gets quiet. And then he comes back and he like throws the dude's head at everybody's feet, and the tea hadn't even gotten cold yet. Like it was still warm. Like he's like, "Here you go," and just throws his head in front of everybody. And it's like, "There you go, he's dead now."
So he handled that guy pretty quick, huh?
Pretty quick.
Oh, okay.
Like he charged at him, and he just cut his head off immediately, and was like, "There you go, I'm done." Yeah. So Guanyu, major badass. Zhang Fei, also a badass. His character in the book is portrayed as like an angry drunk, so he's always like yelling at people and screaming obscenities, which is fantastic. He's so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
And then Liyue is supposed to be related to the imperial family. Because after the emperor dies, which he dies during the Yellow Turban Rebellion, his son takes over, and his son's name is Liu Bian, right? So the Liu family is the imperial family, and Liyue is supposed to be some relative of the imperial family, but his side of the family ended up being poor, so he ends up growing up being like a sandal maker or something.
I know that feeling. Come from the poor side of the family. That's how I.
Yeah. That's what it is. And he never gets invited to the imperial reunions.
Yeah, you got to watch all your cousins with their nice toys and their cars and their family dinners and
Christmas.
It's just yeah. So I feel you. You bad. I'm with you.
I get it. So Liu Bei, Zhang Fei, and Guanyu, they all meet up, and they in the book they become sworn brothers, where they all decide that they all have the same goal, which is to create peace among the land, and they all swear brotherhood, that they'll all live the same day and die the same day. And it's one of those things that, while historically they are really close, there's this really like romanticized oath that they take in a peach orchard, where they all do that. It's all made up. It's not real, probably, like more than likely. But this is what I like about history like this. Like you said, because of like the mystery behind it, you can just kind of believe what you want. I like to believe that happened.
It might happen.
Just because it's not written down doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Well, it is written down. It's in that book.
Exactly, which is a fictional book.
But it's based on a true story.
So after the main rebellion is kind of quelled, you have Jin. Once the emperor dies, his son takes over, and Jin is his uncle, and he basically is trying to get in between the emperor and the eunuchs. Right? He's trying to like wiggle his way in and be like, "Hey kid, what's up? I'm your uncle. If you need my help."
Of the main concubine, right?
Of the main concubine, the main bitch.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
And he still has a dick.
He does. That's why he was so dangerous.
That's exactly. They're like, "Oh shit, guys, a dicked one's here." So he tries to come in between the emperor and the eunuchs, right? He basically is like, "Hey, bro, I'm your uncle, and I'll help you take, rule China until you become old enough to figure it out for yourself." And as he's trying to do that, the eunuchs are like, "Well, that's not cool." Well, they get word that Jin was actually planning on killing the eunuchs.
Right.
So they're like, "Well, we'll just Uno reverse him and fucking kill him first."
Right.
So they write up this letter. They say it's from his sister. And they're like, "Meet me in some back alleyway. We'll call it Crime Alley." And he goes there, and lo and behold, he gets fucking stabbed like Caesar.
What?
Fucking
in Crime Alley.
in Crime Alley. Who'd have thought that crime would happen in Crime Alley?
Captain.
Bruce Wayne.
Oh my god! You know what would have been great though if the
Hmm.
eunuchs had just made him a eunuch.
Oh yeah, they just cut his dick off.
Like, what? You can't do shit now.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? You don't have a dick. They're
Those
like
are the
wagging it in
rules.
front of him.
Those are the rules. If you don't have a dick, you can't be emperor.
Can't do shit. So Jin dies. However, he has a lot of supporters that were very powerful, including Yuan Shu and Yuan Shao, who would become major players in the wars against Cao Cao. So a lot of these guys, they hear what happens and they're like, yo, that's not fucking okay. And they attack the capital in order to kill the eunuchs, right? Well, a fire breaks out. The eunuchs are getting murdered. Two of the major ones take the two young emperor, or they take the emperor and his brother, and they escape the city. So they escape the city. They're out in the middle of nowhere, but the two eunuchs freak out and think they're going to die, and they take their dicks and they slit their throats.
Oh my god.
Well, they kill themselves. But they kill themselves, and even more fucked up, they just leave the emperor and his brother just in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
They just leave them there. I think in the book they're by themselves. They probably had some kind of servants or something with them, because they usually had some close servants that would stay with them. But yeah, they're just in the middle of fucking nowhere. Well, before Jin had died, he had called on to Dong Zhuo, who was this warlord that was in the eastern part. Oh no, I'm sorry, the western part of China.
Right. He's like a big fat guy, right? He's a bit of a Simpson.
He's a big fat guy. Big fatty fat.
He likes to drink some beers and eat some donuts.
Yeah. Chinese donuts?
I had a donut last night. Whoa.
Calm down, Dong Zhuo.
And hey, I had a couple of beers too.
Whoa! Oh my god. I can see you becoming a tyrant.
They call me Dong.
Who? Dong what? Dong Low? Dong Low? Oh, okay. Okay, Dong.
Yeah, I like that. Call me Dong from now on.
So Dong Zhuo is he's a leader, he's a general, and he has a very impressive cavalry. So he is like what we were talking about earlier with like how the peasants were, is a lot of the infantry of a Chinese army were peasants. So a lot of them weren't really trained well. I remember somebody I watched was somebody talked about if a Roman legion went against like a Chinese army, and the Romans would probably win most times, just because while the Chinese had better tactics and had different ways of like doing battle like that, their people were just peasants who just like barely knew how to fucking swing a spear. They would just do that in a direction that they could kill people. But like a Roman legion was so well trained that they're like, there's no way that the well trained army could do that. Well, the only kind of like caveat to that rule is cavalry, because for a cavalry person, you had to have enough money to have a horse, and then you had to be trained in that horse, and then you had to be trained how to fight on it. So he had, yeah. So Dong Zhuo had like the best heavy cavalry that existed in like this time period. So he comes up with his army, and he actually finds the emperor and his brother, and is like, "Oh, what are you guys doing out here? You guys cold? Well, let's take you back to the capital." He picks up the boys. He goes to the capital, sees everything in chaos. It's on fire. The eunuchs are dead. A bunch of other fucking military officials are dead, and he's got the emperor. And when you're in China, if you have the emperor, you have the power. You are now the one in charge. So he shows up and says, "Hey, guess who's in charge now? Me." But this is also how evil Dong Zhuo is. Like, he is an evil tyrant. He looks at the young boy that is emperor and decides that he's too old to influence, right? Like, I can't remember how old he was. He was probably like, I think maybe like 14, 13, something like that. Like, he was older enough that like he could at least maybe speak up for himself. And he goes, "I don't like that." So he deposes the emperor and puts his younger brother on the throne, and then he kills the emperor and his mom.
That's what you gotta do.
That's some fucking conniving political shit. Yeah. And I love it. It's so fucking fun.
If you want the power, you gotta take it. You gotta seize it.
Seize the day, including killing a little boy.
Yeah, I mean, who cares?
Yeah, fuck him, I say. So then he takes over. He puts up the younger one on the throne. He becomes the prime minister, and he basically just like takes over ruling. It is even worse than the 10 eunuchs were before. And then now we get to cover arguably the best part of the Three Kingdoms.
So wait, what happened to the 10 eunuchs? They all killed themselves?
Oh, they died. Yeah, the ones that didn't kill themselves all died. They all got murdered savagely.
They got murdered by who? The Yellow Turbans?
No, they got murdered by Jin's like loyal friends, like Yuan Shao, Yuan Shu, a bunch of warlords who supported Jin. They all found out that he got murdered by them, because once they murdered him, they thought that was just it. They're like, yeah, once we murder Jin, we're good. Yeah. So they didn't even really try to hide it. You know, they'd just be like, oh, Jin got murdered? I wonder who did that. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Huh? Yeah. They'd be like, we don't know who murdered him, but they probably had the biggest penises ever. Am I right?
Yeah, you know what they say. An eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind.
Yeah. And they were already blind because they didn't have it. So.
What? That's not what a penis does.
Yeah, no, it's got the eye. That's what that's referred to as the eye of the penis.
The eye of the penis.
Yeah, that's the pee-pee hole.
Penis is the window to the soul.
I would believe it.
I would too.
Yeah. That's why a shattered window is very painful.
Any ladies listening out there, pay attention to the penis.
Pay attention to the penis.
The penis will tell you why.
The penis of Magister. Okay. We're talking too much about penises on this episode. It's supposed to be about history, not penises.
Yeah, but there were so many dicks throughout history.
That is true. So now that we've gotten to Dong Zhuo, we can get to arguably the greatest part of Dynasty Warriors, unless you're fighting him, which is
Lubu.
Oh no, it's Lubu. Exactly.
Lubu is the boy.
Lubu is awesome.
Lubu's so cool.
He is, and he's like one of those characters that really has a myth about him. You know, that like you don't really know what was true, what's not. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the big characteristics of him is that he likes to portray people. Before he meets Dong Zhuo, he actually meets Dong Zhuo at one of the meetings that like the Imperial Court was having to talk about the rebellion, and he meets this guy, and he's talking with this dude, and this dude is like, "Oh, fuck you, Dong Zhuo. I don't like you. You're a fat son of a bitch." But then I think Dong Zhuo like tries to attack him or something, like maybe pulls his sword or something, and then Lubu like gets in front of him and like stops his hand, you know, from like striking him or something. And when Dong Zhuo sees who stops him, it's this fucking giant warrior, Lubu, who's in like glamorous armor, and he's got a giant like Bowie headdress on and everything. And he's so just enamored by this guy. He asks his like strategist or, you know, assistant. He's like, "Who is that guy?" He's like, "Oh, that's Lubu. That's that other dude's you know, adopted son." He's like, "I totally want him." And then the dude's like, "Okay, Dong Zhuo." He's like, I actually grew up with him. I actually know him, so I could actually kind of like break the ice a little bit, go talk with him, and maybe I can bring him over to our side." So he takes with him Dong Zhuo's most prized horse, which was called the Red Hare.
Right.
And the Red Hare was this giant fucking... I always imagined it like a Clydesdale, even though it probably wasn't. But I just imagine it's like a big red-haired Clydesdale, just because I always imagine this giant fucking horse. Yeah. But he takes this horse and a bunch of like jewelry and shit, and he goes to Lubu, and he's like, "Yo, Lubu, that dude you saw earlier, Dong Zhuo, he fucking likes you, and he wants you. So how about I give you this horse and like a bunch of money, and you come over to my side?" And he's like, "Well, I can't do that. I'm working with this other guy who's kind of my adoptive father." And he's like, "Why don't you just kill him?"
Yeah, fuck him.
He's like, "If you kill him, you don't really have to work for him." And Lubu was like, "You know what? That kind of makes sense." Yeah. So he just goes over to the guy's tent, fucking murks him hardcore, just murders the shit out of him.
Hey guy who adopted me and raised me, wanted me to be a warrior. I'm gonna go work for this other fellow.
I'm sorry, but I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. 2 weeks notice, you can't do that. Well, like I'm also doing this. Should cut off his head. So he kills this guy, and then he goes to Dong Zhuo, and then Dong Zhuo, funny enough, becomes his adopted father. Because that was just a thing in that culture, is you could just, as much as I've been fun of it before, you could like adopt someone in that kind of way, where you're just like, I'm taking him on as a son, type thing, even though you didn't really, you're not even related at all. But yeah, so Lubu.
Yeah, well, with all these wars, there was a lot of people without dad.
That is true. That is true. With the declining population, they're like, "Fuck, I just need a dad."
Yeah, they killed 40 million dads.
That's a lot of dads.
That's
a lot of dads.
It's a big old dad massacre.
Yeah.
Dad-sicker?
Yeah. Would Father's Day is not even a holiday then, I guess, if it's that many dads lost.
Yeah, Father's Day is probably a bit of a downer in this time period. Hey, Dad, I got you this necktie.
Oh.
It's like, but I don't even have a head anymore.
I got my head cut off, and then they took my penis.
What am I gonna do with? I don't even have a neck. What am I gonna do with a tie?
Fucking idiot! I'm glad I'm dead.
Stupid idiot! You're gonna be dead soon too.
Yeah. Oh, you having a kid? Good. Welcome to dad hell.
You'll see. Just wait till the next war. They're gonna come call you.
But yeah, Lubu, he's amazing. We're gonna get into more detail with Lubu in the next episode. I think we've covered everything I want to cover for this one. The next episode we will talk about Dong Zhuo, his rise and downfall. We will talk about what Lubu's up to afterwards. Number 6 will surprise you. We'll talk about the beginning of Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and the Sun family, because we didn't really mention the Sun family, but we'll mention them next time. That's been the first part. It is a lot of characters, and hopefully I'll be able to streamline it a bit more and get more coverage in there. But that's been the first part of the Three Kingdoms series on the Not Your Daddy's History podcast. So thank you, Steve, for coming on to this series. He's going to be my guy during this one. I think he's
thanks for having me. I'm actually really looking forward to doing more research.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to cook up some actual jokes for the next episode. So I got some shit to say. Throw
some shit on the fire.
I'm gonna have some zingers for you.
Gotcha. Okay. Lubu, more like boo-hoo.
More like boo you because you suck because you keep betraying everybody. Lubu.
Guanyu, more like boo-hoo. That's the only joke I can think of right now. See, this is why we have to work on. We'll write on it. And we'll figure it out.
You know what my favorite part about this whole story is?
What's that?
Is that there's so many dudes named Dong, and then so many dudes without dongs.
That's true.
Do you think do you think any of the eunuchs were named Dong?
I would imagine so. Okay, well, we'll discuss more of that on the next episode. Steve, thanks so much for being on here, and we will see you next time. And remember, this is Not Your Daddy's History.